Hi, my name is Amariah Condon and you're watching Beyond Saugus. I'm here at Boston Symphony Hall where I'm about to get a behind-the-scenes tour of one of the best acoustical halls in the world. Hi, my name is Amariah Condon. I'm traveling to exciting locations in the greater Boston area, and I'm bringing my camera with me. I'm here with Mary Gregorio, and she will be our tour guide today. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little about how you got interested in taking people on tours of the Symphony Hall and how long you've been doing it.
Well, I actually became a subscriber to the Boston Symphony in the fall of 1975 when I graduated from Boston College, and I've been coming ever since. I come on Thursday nights, so I've been a 38-year subscriber. And about 20 years ago, I joined the Boston Symphony Association of Volunteers, and part of what we do is give tours of this grand hall. Symphony Hall Boston is known for its world-famous acoustics. So this tour will highlight that. We'll talk about the statues that were all appeared the first 2 years that were put in the hall for maximizing the lovely sound of this hall. We're also going to be talking about the recent renovations, including the restoration of our 4,000 plus pipe organ. And we're going to talk too about the history of the repertoire and the many famous individuals who've conducted the symphony, the many people who are graduates of the Tanglewood Music Center in the Berkshires, the summer home of the symphony, and the major role that Symphony Hall and the Boston Symphony plays in the cultural life of Boston. You're sitting among 2,625 seats here. There's about 300 fewer seats for the pops. These seats now have been replaced. They were replaced a couple years ago, but there's a few that are still the old ones. You can tell because they're kind of cracked, but they were originally green and they turned black over the years. And the reason they're hard and uncomfortable is so that the sound isn't in your seat cushion and you don't appreciate being here. So they're a little bit more softer, but here's what happened was, if you've come this year at all, have you heard the seat plop down at least once or twice? You think it's happening more now than, okay. Figured out why. The seats are heavier now. So they're slowly putting springs in all the seats now. So like this one, okay. So on this floor, on row H, which is a little further up, there's an elevator that takes all these chairs downstairs. Channel 4 a few years ago had a story on this, and they showed a time sped up series. And there's like 5 of them, and they're attached on risers, and they just have to unbolt them, and they take them downstairs, and it's no way you can do this fast. It's pretty old-fashioned. And then they take the risers and the seats downstairs. Then they take up the 260 tables with the 5 little chairs. They bring those up. Then they do that again. And they might do that even more often if there's some special fundraiser, because you can rent the hall. I won't tell you how much it is, but you can rent the hall. You can endow a seat on stage, which is a good amount of money. A lot of the principals plays, their positions are endowed. What's great is this: people who've been coming years after years after years who have the same seats. And one of the books I have on the BSO has a quote by Cleveland Amory, who was a famous critic, who talked about how for years elderly women would march to their seats on Friday afternoons with their fur coats on and their chauffeurs outside, and they would obviously all the time forget their tickets, but no usher would dare stop them because they've been marching to the same seats for years and years and years.
Outsiders who visit Symphony for the first time rarely remember much about the music, however widely acclaimed Boston's orchestra has been, but they never forget the spectacle of the audience. The proper Boston woman has a busy day on Friday. She has a Chilton Club lecture and a Chilton Club lunch, but she is never late and seldom early for Symphony. For more than half a century, attired in her sensible coat, her sensible hat, and her sensible shoes, she has entered the hall promptly at 2:25 and swept serenely to her seat in a manner that defies description. If she forgets her ticket, it is no tragedy. A large proportion of patrons regularly do this, but they have been so resolutely marching towards the same seats for so many years that no usher, even in a packed hall, would dare attempt to stop them. Cleveland Avery, The Proper Bostonians, 1947.
but this was built with acoustics in mind. The ceiling, it's what they call a coffered ceiling. It's indented, and the idea is you can't have flat surfaces because the sound bounces off. So that's why you have these statues. There's 16 statues. They were reproductions, classical reproductions. They're plaster. They're not marble at all. And they were picked by a group of 200 women. Proper Bostonians were very embarrassed because of the nudity. So they had drapes over some of them. I find it somewhat amusing now because we have LED lighting under the statues now, so everything's very vivid. They're Greek and Roman figures, art, music, literature, and most of them are actually real. Oh, the reason to why the balconies are perforated, same thing. You need to have it so that the sound doesn't bounce off. Reason why these chairs are really, really hard. That's why if you cough, everyone hears you. If you talk, if the chair next to you flops down, it sounds like it's been going on for 20 minutes. It's just torture.
The first home of the Boston Symphony Orchestra was the old Boston Music Hall, which was threatened in 1893 by a city road-building rapid transit project. That summer, the orchestra's founder, Major Henry Lee Higginson, organized a corporation to finance a new and permanent home for the orchestra. Symphony Hall opened on October 15, 1900, with an inaugural gala led by music director Wilhelm Garrick. The architects, McKim, Mead, and White of New York, engaged Wallace Clemens Sabine, a young assistant professor of physics at Harvard, as their acoustical consultant, and Symphony Hall became the first auditorium designed in accordance with scientifically derived acoustical principles. Sabine developed a mathematical formula that enabled him to predict the reverberation time, which is how long it takes for a note played on stage to die out, before the building was built, so that an ideal reverberation time of 1.9 to 2.1 seconds could be achieved. Then, in order to focus the sound on the main seating areas, an optimal shape was selected for the concert hall, and space between the rows of seats was kept at 5 inches. Finally, an acoustically ideal stage was constructed for the orchestra. The walls, ceiling, and floor of the stage slope inward to project the sound onto the audience. Today, more than 100 years after it was built, Symphony Hall still offers concertgoers a truly memorable experience.
There's also the microphones. Sometimes you'll see microphones there. You see a few of them now. They're really for recording purposes. They're not for sound unless there's say a jazz or a spoken program. So if you hear, there's a piece that requires an operatic singer, there's no amplification. It's the person's power of their voice. The hall is dedicated to Beethoven. That's why you see the medallion. And the connection was Higginson, the founder, studied in Banner, and Beethoven is obvious. There was some debate about why these sections, these medallions are empty. One was not being able to agree on who to honor. The more popular version is that they didn't have the fund. And the concern about putting anybody's name is that they may become out of vogue. If you go to the Hat Shell, there are composers that some people don't know who they are. Here, if we did this, it would be a lot of Western European composers. And what's another little fun story is that for years they were trying to raise money, which they did, for the B. So now you see the B, the S, and the O on top of the building now that's there all year, except when the Plops is here. Because there's no outdoor signage. And the thought was that it's well enough known that you don't need a name. But originally it was going to be called the Boston Music Hall, but because the other building wasn't demolished, it was just called Symphony Hall. Did a lot of work on the organ. The organ, well, let me ask, how many pipes do you think there are? And there are pipes behind. About 4,100. There used to be about 1,000 more, and they removed some when they did the renovations because it was too hard for the workers to get there to clean them. But they range from 6 inches, a ballpoint pen, to 32 feet. Company Mike Foley and Baker out of Tolan, Connecticut, they were hired by the BSO. Took them the summer, 7 years ago, and about $2 million to clean the organ. And the pipes are made out of tin and lead, and they're painted gold. It's not real gold, obviously, or we'd be sitting pretty here. And then there's a $1 million endowment fund to take care of the repairs.
Behind the scenes, supporting the musical excellence of conductors and musicians alike, are the Boston Symphony Orchestra librarians. Let's visit with John Purkell. I'm here with John Purkell, and he's one of the librarians at the Boston Symphony Orchestra. I was wondering if you could tell me a little about how you got involved as becoming one of the librarians here at the orchestra.
Very good question. From the time I was a child, I was exposed to music from my parents, and they took me to Tanglewood, which is the summer home of the Boston Symphony, when I was about 6 years old, and I've been going ever since. I studied the violin from the time I was about 7 for a long time, but it wasn't really the job I was looking for. I was a school teacher for a number of years, and that wasn't really the job I was looking for, but I was very fortunate to have many contacts in the field of music. And one of the former librarians of the Boston Symphony was one of my mentors, and he encouraged me to consider the job that I eventually was fortunate enough to get. The music right over here is our core repertoire. That is music that we're most likely to perform, and it's organized alphabetically by composer. These are complete sets of parts. So if we were to pull out this piece, it's a Mozart piano concerto. All the parts for this particular piece are contained here. Everything you need to play the piece. We have a very large collection upstairs that includes a continuation of the symphonic music, all of the Boston Pops music, chamber music, audition music, and so on.
How do you prepare for a performance at the BSO?
That's an excellent question. First thing we have to do is find out what all the repertoire is. And this is months in advance, except for Pops concerts. And then we have to see what edition will be used. And if we don't know, then it's our job to find out. And then when we find out what edition we need, we see if we have it. And if we don't have it, then we have to either rent it or buy it. Many works are copyrighted and not able to be purchased. So you have to pay a publisher to get the parts, mark them the way you want them, and then return it to the publisher when you're done. And it's expensive, but it's the only way you can get certain pieces of music. Sometimes you have a choice, and when there's a choice, rent versus buy, you always buy, because it will pay for itself in the long run.
If you were to say like one section of the entire, like if you were to lose, say, the viola part for a Mozart concerto, or hypothetically, how would you get that back? Do you buy it individually? Is it?
Excellent question. If it's a string part, and if it's in the public domain, as Mozart is, it's very simple. You could either buy another part or just photocopy another part. If you buy it, however, you'd have to rebow it. And by bow it, I mean you'd have to make all the markings for the string players so they know whether to go this way, down bow, this way, up bow. We don't decide the bowings. The principals decide the bowings, but it's our job to implement them into all the parts. And as an example, you see that V? Mm-hmm. That means up bow. You start here, and in French, it's pousser, okay, which means push, up. And the opposite is a down bow. It's basically a square minus the bottom. Mm-hmm. And there's one other important marking. A slur is everything in the same bow for the duration of the slur. And if you bought a part, it wouldn't have that. You'd have to put it in by hand. I'm a former violinist, so bowings to me are second nature. They're very easy for me. And sometimes someone who's not a string player might have a little bit of an adjustment in terms of understanding the concept of bowings. I think one of the most important aspects of being a good orchestra librarian, and I'm not kidding about this, is having a good sense of humor. Because there is a lot of pressure at times. Everybody wants something from me. My part needs to be fixed. I lost my part. The dog ate my part. I have had that happen. The one dreaded word I never want to hear during a performance is library. And it doesn't really happen very much, fortunately.
Has that happened?
During a performance, no. During a rehearsal, yes.
And what does that mean when they call out library?
It means you better get downstairs as fast as you can and see what the problem is. Usually it's innocuous. Usually it's nothing. Typically, a player is in a hurry and doesn't go through his folder, and he'll think that a part is missing, and I'll run downstairs and I'll say, oh, here it is.
That doesn't happen often, though.
No. And occasionally a player will forget a part for a concert. That's hair-raising. But we have ways. Either we have extra music, or because of scanning now, PDF emails, we can get it from the publisher if we have to. It's very rare, but it has happened. I liken my job to that of a basketball referee, meaning that if I'm doing my job correctly, you don't notice me. I don't want to be noticed. If there's a problem, you might notice me. It's like a referee making a bad call. People will get on him. It's a little bit analogous.
Well, thank you, Mary. It was a wonderful tour, and thank you for inviting us Saugus people into the Boston Symphony Hall.
Well, I'm a Melrosian, so we want to welcome our neighbors to the west. Do come back for the real thing. We very much appreciate the support of our patrons.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for watching this episode of Beyond Saugus, and feel free to come out and see a show here. It's just Beyond Saugus.
Well, I'm a Melrosian, so we want to welcome our neighbors to the west. I like to say that I used to like to think that I was from the North Shore, but we missed it by one town. Sounds Richie saying I'm from the North Shore, but Saugus was as close as we could get. But to put it, you can put that in if you want.